This video is going to be a spoiler review for the Child's Play remake as well as a discussion of all of the previous Chucky movies. If for some reason you care about having this awful remake spoiled for you, you can skip to the time specified on screen to hear my thoughts on all of the original Chucky sequels. I watched the original Child's Play about a year or two ago. I didn't love it or anything. I thought it was okay. I had fun with it, and I could see why people thought it was a classic. So going into this remake, I didn't really have high expectations, and I really didn't expect to hate it at all. I was actually kind of excited because the marketing for this movie was great, especially the posters that played off of Toy Story. There were various posters of, him having killed Woody and Slinky and stuff like that, and I thought that was really clever, so maybe this remake had something unique to offer. I thought it could have been a really fun movie, but I fucking hated it. It was awful, and my problems with it started from the very first scene of the movie. In the original movie, the reason the doll is alive is because a serial killer used voodoo to, put his soul into the doll. And sure, it's dumb and it doesn't make any sense and that would never happen in real life, but the thing about the original movie is, it doesn't take itself seriously enough where you question that happening. It's just, you just kind of roll with it because the entire movie is just kind of silly and tongue-in-cheek and aware that it's not, a super serious movie. This movie does away with all of that and says, oh, actually, we're going to be a serious horror movie and, we want you to take us seriously. So we're not going to have the doll be alive because of voodoo. We're going to have, we're going to show the scene where there's this guy making the doll in a Korean factory, and he gets pissed off at his boss, and he starts basically making the doll evil. And this is the problem that I have with it, okay? He starts disabling the safety features on the doll, which I guess is whatever. It's a smart AI doll, so, I guess AIs have safety features and all that, but if you actually pay attention to the stuff he's disabling, there are specific safety features that say, this is the safety feature for, whether or not he values human life. This is the safety feature for, whether or not he wants to kill people. Why the fuck? That shouldn't even be an option on the doll. Say, we're going to have a secret program on this child's toy to where, if you turn the safety features off, it'll actually be programmed to kill somebody. What the fuck? It was the stupidest fucking thing in the world. It was less believable than the voodoo shit. I can't recall specifically what it said on screen when he was disabling all the safety features, but I'm serious. It was specifically, this is the safety feature to turn off if you want this doll to kill somebody. It's why? Why would that even be an option? That implies that the programmers making the doll specifically designed the doll to be able to do that and turned it off by default. That shouldn't even be an option in a kid's toy. Then of course, from this point on, half of the movie is just a series of events leading the AI to learn of killing and stuff like that and justify to himself that killing is okay. And my main problem with the movie, the main thing that makes this movie suck more than any other Child's Play movie is that the doll has no personality. And I know this isn't an original criticism. A lot of people have said this up to this point, but I completely agree. The doll is literally just an AI. All of his lines are either the pre-programmed lines you've heard from, Chucky a million times before, or he's repeating stuff that he's already heard from another character. It's not like the original movies where, the original voice actor, Brad Dourif, I believe his name is, he had a lot of personality, he had his own original lines. It was really funny and entertaining to watch him go around, doing crazy shit and saying funny shit. This doll does nothing. Mark Hamill in this role has nothing to work with because this doll has no personality. I think I speak for a number of Chucky fans when I say I watch the Chucky movies for Chucky himself. He is what makes the movies entertaining. I don't give a shit about the humans. The appeal of the Chucky movies is Chucky himself. So when you make Chucky boring, it makes the movie boring. They not only ruined his personality in this movie, they also ruined his appearance. I'm sure you've probably seen the images floating around the internet at this point. They really tried to hide what he looked like in the trailers, and I think that was a smart move because, holy shit, his design is awful. I think the original design of the doll is perfect. It's fine. It looks like a cute doll that a kid would play with, and when it looks evil, it looks evil and creepy. It completely works. It didn't need to be changed. They changed this doll, and it's some people are calling it creepy, and I completely disagree. It doesn't even look creepy. It just looks ugly. It just looks bad ugly. It kind of looks like a bootleg Chucky doll that you would get from a discount store. It doesn't look good at all. It's not effectively creepy. It's not effectively funny. It's not cute. It's not anything. It just looks awful. It looks like an unfinished product. What kid would want to play with a doll like that? Chucky also has no reason to kill the people he does in this movie. There's a few people where it justifies his killing by saying, oh, well, he heard Andy say, he wishes that person wasn't in his life. So, the doll took that to mean he wants him to kill that person. And whatever, I guess that's fine. That's a justifiable reason. But there's other people he kills, especially near the end of the movie, that he literally has no reason to kill. And considering that you're setting this character up to be like this learning AI that has, a programmable reason for everything, it just kind of breaks the illusion. There's this old lady he kills at the end, and he has no reason to kill her at all. Andy never said anything along the lines of, oh, I wish she wasn't in my life anymore or anything. He just kills the old lady for no fucking reason. Also, at one point, he ends up being in the hands of like this fat neckbeard who dwells in the basement of this apartment complex, and he kills that guy too for literally no reason. And more than them just fucking up the character of Chucky so bad, what frustrates me about this movie is that the idea of like this Alexa type, smart home device that can control all the other devices in your house malfunctioning, like that could really work for a good horror movie. They could have done so many really cool, unique, scary ideas. But they fucked it up. They had no idea how to execute this concept that they had in any sort of effective way. It's more a gimmick than anything. It's barely even used, and when it is used, it is fucking retarded. For example, when he kills the old woman, he controls her car and makes it crash or some shit. Which makes no sense. Why would you give a child's toy the ability to control your car? That seems like a really bad call. All of this is made even worse by the fact that this movie takes itself a lot more seriously than the original movie. Again, there's stuff that happens in the original movie that isn't plausible, but you kind of just forgive it because the movie is just so tongue-in-cheek and self-aware that you're just having fun with it, and it's a lot of fun to watch. This one, it tries to ground itself in reality. It tries to be more realistic, but by doing that, all of the implausible things that happen in it just seem really fucking stupid. Some people try to say, oh, this one's self-aware too because it has, it has humor and jokes in it. But just because a movie has comedy in it and jokes in it, and they acknowledge, oh, this is an ugly-looking doll, that doesn't make it as self-aware and as fun as the originals. On the whole, it takes itself a lot more seriously and tries to be a lot more grounded, and it works to its detriment. The story for this is frustratingly stupid. The cop in this movie is led to believe, based on very loose evidence, that a 12-year-old, 13-year-old boy has killed several people. And based on this loose, circumstantial evidence, he chases this kid down without an arrest warrant and tackles him onto the ground in public. He believes he is such a threat to humanity that he just tackles this kid to the ground in the middle of a store and handcuffs him and is like, you're coming with me, buddy. I know you killed all these people and you're just a fucking threat and I'm taking you down right now, buddy. Like, he barely has any reason to believe this. Again, very loose circumstantial evidence. Really, if anything, he should have went after the kid's mother because there's just as much evidence that she did it as the kid did it, and it would be much more believable if he had went after the mother and suspected her. But no, he tackles this fucking kid in a store. The cop in this movie acts so fucking retarded, it's almost a parody. The climax of this movie is also awful. They sort of do the Child's Play 3 thing where, Chucky controls all the toys and makes them kill people. But there's, at the very end of the climax, Chucky captures the kid's mom and he's got her, tied up with a noose up to this crane thing that's slowly rising. By the time Andy rescues his mom, she would have been long dead from hanging. She was being hung for about a minute before he cut the rope. But of course, she's fine despite having been hung all of that time and falling about 10 feet. No broken bones, no serious injuries. She just immediately gets up and is like, relief. I'm so glad my son saved me. The movie is also bad, technically, it has some bad editing. There's one scene that really stuck out in my mind where the main kid, Andy, is leaning up against a wall looking on his phone, and it's a shot reverse shot kind of conversation, and in one shot he's holding his phone vertically, and in the next shot he's holding his phone horizontally, and it constantly switches between these two shots, and his phone is constantly switching positions, and he never actually moves his phone between shots. It just, again, it's an editing mistake. And it's not something that's like, oh, I'm so smart, I caught this small detail in the background of a shot that's, inconsistent with, the other shot. Like, this is something that is in front of the kid's face that the audience can clearly see, and it is changing position between shots several times. That's just really bad. That's inexcusable. This movie made me furious. I was so mad when I walked out of the theater. I did not expect to be this emotionally upset by this movie, but I was. This movie was such wasted potential. The fact that this movie was so terrible actually made me appreciate the original movies a lot more. It opened my eyes to like how good the original was in such a big way that after I watched this, I had like an insatiable craving to watch the original movies because I had only seen the first one. So I was like, there's like 6 other Child's Play movies that I haven't seen, so fuck it, let's watch them. So I did. I watched all of the sequels. Before we get into those, I just want to say Child's Play remake fucking sucks. It's a 3 out of 10. I hate it. Now, after watching all of them, I've got to say, the Chucky franchise as a whole is pretty solid all the way through. And I think that's in large part because of its creator, Don Mancini. He has really stuck with this franchise for every single installment, except for the remake, of course. He didn't want anything to do with that fucking garbage. But the rest of the Chucky movies are written by him. It would be like, if James Wan had stuck with the Saw franchise, it would have been considerably better had he done that. And that's exactly what happened with the Chucky franchise. The original writer of the first one stayed to make the rest of them, and even has directed the most recent Chucky movies, of course, except for the remake, because that one sucks ass. The original voice of Chucky, Brad Dourif, also has stayed with this franchise for 30 years, and it just really helps the franchise as a whole feel really solid. So I'm going to go ahead and discuss all of the sequels in the order that I watched them, because I did not watch them in release order, unfortunately. Because the day I watched the Child's Play remake, again, I had such an insatiable craving to watch actual good Chucky movies that I watched the first one that I actually had access to, and the only one that I had access to on that day was Curse of Chucky. And now this is one of the more recent ones. It came out in 2013, I believe, and it's actually a straight-to-video movie. This was a really bad choice to start off with because near the end of the movie, it starts referencing other Chucky movies that I hadn't seen, so I was actually really confused as to some of the events that were going on in the plot. In hindsight, I did end up appreciating those scenes a lot more, but even given that, I still don't think this is a great movie. Again, this was a straight-to-video production, and because of that, it has pretty poor production quality. Unlike some other independent films where, they have low budgets, the low budget of this movie, I feel, definitely hinders it and holds it back from being good. If they had hired better actors and a better cinematographer, I feel like this movie could have been significantly better. Chucky also doesn't really start doing anything in this movie until about 50 minutes in. Everything up to that point is just bland characters interacting with each other in a mildly creepy environment. Once Chucky did start doing stuff, it was pretty entertaining, but on the whole, I just thought this was an okay movie. I don't dislike it. It's definitely better than the piece of shit remake. After watching that and being confused, I decided it was best if I watched these in release order, so I went all the way back to Child's Play 2. And this movie was exactly what I needed after that awful remake. Chucky is great in this movie. Like the original movie, he's got a lot of personality. He says and does funny shit, and he's involved in this movie from the very start. In the first movie, it took a little while because it had to build up the suspense of this doll being alive, but in this one, it doesn't really have to do that, and he's like going around doing crazy shit from the get-go. And watching this just reinforced my belief that the reason the Child's Play remake, like a large part of why it doesn't work, is because they just fundamentally changed the character of Chucky. The reason I enjoyed, and I did enjoy Child's Play 2, is because Chucky was just so entertaining in the movie. Like, everything he does is, like, hilarious and awesome. He really makes the movie for me. If he had been the same character he was in the remake, then I probably wouldn't have liked this movie at all. The climax in this movie too was also pretty awesome. It's a climax in this toy factory. It was really exciting and entertaining, and a lot more memorable than the climax of the first movie, which I honestly can't even recall right now. People complain that Child's Play 2 is way too similar to the first movie, but since I haven't seen the first movie in a couple of years, the similarities didn't really bother me as much. And again, it really satisfied my need to watch, an actual decent Chucky movie. I also feel that Child's Play 2 is more eventful than the first movie, but my memory could be serving me wrong. Again, it's been a couple of years since I watched the first one. Then we get to Child's Play 3. Now, this is the only Chucky movie out of the originals that I actively dislike. I don't think it's good at all. This is also the creator, Don Mancini's least favorite Chucky movie, and it was because he was really pressured to make this one really fast. The Chucky 3, or Child's Play 3 rather, came out less than a year. It was like 9 or 10 months after Child's Play 2. So he had to make this script really quick, and he didn't have any time to come up with any solid ideas or a good script, and it really shows because this is the weakest of the original movies in my opinion. This one follows Chucky and Andy as they go to military school. And it sounds really stupid. They could have done something really fun with it, but they don't. And it ends up just being really, really boring. They don't really take full advantage of the silliness of this premise beyond, a few minor characters. The haircut guy is one that a lot of people like. And sure, he's fun, but beyond him, there's not really a lot that's entertaining about this movie. It really falls back onto war movie cliches. It makes the human drama in the movie really boring, and unfortunately the human drama is what makes up the majority of this movie. Unlike Child's Play 2, Chucky isn't in the movie a lot. Chucky really barely does anything in this movie. A lot of the time he's just being passed around from character to character as, a limp doll. And then whenever he does try to do something kind of crazy, someone walks in and interrupts him and he's got to play dead again. So, he doesn't really get to do a lot in the movie, and it makes the movie, significantly more boring than the previous two. Chucky's also after a new kid in this movie. He finds a new kid to go after, because he's got to get his soul into another body. And this new kid is just annoying and stupid, and I hated him. He sucked. There's not much to say about this one because there's really not a lot going on in the movie. It's really forgettable, it's completely skippable if you haven't seen it, and it's definitely my least favorite of the originals. Now we come to The Bride of Chucky and The Seed of Chucky. These are extremely controversial entries into this franchise, and going into them I was actually kind of scared that I wouldn't like them at all because, again, they have pretty poor reception by critics and fans all around. This was during the Scream era after the first Scream came out and every horror movie was trying to be Scream. And so these movies have that sort of meta humor in it. And from what I've seen, people don't like these two movies because they're not slasher movies. Up until this point, Chucky has treated itself as a slasher franchise, and these two movies are actually comedy movies more than slasher movies. And a lot of people really hate that. A lot of people don't like that the series was taken in that direction. But I'm going to be a contrarian here. I don't give a shit. I don't care that these movies aren't slasher movies. In fact, I actually like that they took the franchise in the direction that they did. Because I said this before, I watched Chucky for Chucky. I love the character. I think he's insanely entertaining. I think he's hilarious. And so my ideal Chucky movie would just be following him, saying funny shit and doing crazy shit. I watched the Child's Play movies for the laugh that Chucky can give me in the first place, so transitioning his character into a comedy movie is perfect. People also complained about the fact that, again, it tries to attempt this sort of meta humor that was popular at the time. However, I don't think it's a detriment to the movie because I think this kind of meta humor is a perfect fit for the character, because Chucky himself was always very self-aware, tongue-in-cheek, and meta to a certain extent. So transitioning him into this sort of meta-comedy movie is a change that I feel is totally natural. So with all of that being said, I'm going to go ahead and say it. I think both of these movies are completely and utterly underrated. Bride of Chucky introduces my favorite design of the Chucky doll. It's actually the design of Chucky that I sort of grew up with. Bride and Seed of Chucky were the movies that were coming out when I was a kid. And so even though I never watched them, I saw the posters and everything. And so that was the Chucky I was familiar with. And so I do have a little bit of nostalgia for the way Chucky looks in these movies. But beyond that, it is my favorite design of Chucky with the staples and the stitches and everything. And like the way his, like, you can see the flesh around one of his eyeballs. I just think it looks really cool. And so this is my favorite design of Chucky, and Bride of Chucky introduces that design. It also introduces, the bride of Chucky, Tiffany, and I think she's a great new character that plays really well off of Chucky's humor. She has sort of a similar type of humor, and the dialogue between the two I think is really funny. The movie really, when it's focusing on the Chucky dolls, is consistently funny with very snappy dialogue between these dolls. It has a cheesy and dated 90s metal soundtrack that, as a metalhead, of course, I'm going to have a soft spot for and like. But I also feel it goes perfect with the edgy tone of the movie. This being sort of a dark comedy, I feel the, Rob Zombie tracks perfectly fit with the movie. My big drawback with the movie is that the human drama, like previous Chucky movies, the human drama just sucks ass. Like, the human drama in this movie is like a freaking 2 out of 10. It's awful. It's not funny. Fortunately, it's not the focus of the movie. And by the end, the human drama, collides in a chaotic way with Chucky and his bride. And it makes for some really entertaining scenes, near the end. So yeah, I've really enjoyed Bride of Chucky. And it made me a little bit more excited to watch Seed. But I was still overall worried about watching it because Seed is even more universally panned than Bride. Like, I heard people saying this was one of the worst movies they had ever seen. Like, they thought it was completely unfunny and it was just garbage. From what people were saying, I expected something on the level of like an Adam Sandler movie or a Tyler Perry movie, something that was just not funny in the slightest, that was offensive, that was disgusting, and that just, left a bad taste in my mouth after I watched it. But that was not what I got at all. Seed of Chucky is actually pretty fucking hilarious. Seed of Chucky takes the humor, the style of humor from Bride of Chucky, and cranks it up to 11. The humor is even more wild and random, and it had me laughing even harder than the Bride of Chucky. I mean, honestly, I knew I was going to love this movie as soon as Chucky's kid started speaking in Japanese. If you hated the humor of Bride of Chucky, you'll definitely hate this even more because it just doubles down on it. But if you enjoy internet humor, I don't see how you could hate this movie because, in my opinion, it's really not all that different from what you might get from a YouTube video in 2012. It has a lot of really fun visual gags. Glenn's eye twitches to the rhythm of the music occasionally, and it just made me laugh my ass off. Strangely enough, the movie unintentionally, or maybe intentionally, I don't know, but it sort of unintentionally has a pro-trans rights message. Before it was cool to do that. This movie came out in like 2003, 2004. I also think this movie is notable in the franchise because this is the first one that Don Mancini actually directed. This was his directorial debut. Out of all of the Chucky movies leading up to this point, this is the one where he said, all right, I'm going to start taking the reins. And I feel it really helps the visual presentation of the movie. Visually, his direction is an improvement over the previous few movies. Of course, there's nothing groundbreaking in this movie, but I do feel there are several sequences in this with really creative camera work that helped make the movie a lot more fun in tone. And it really helps the film as a whole feel really cohesive, like this is all being made by one person with a clear vision. And, since Seed of Chucky, he has directed every other Chucky movie. I do have negatives with this movie. The stuff with the humans, as usual, is awful. It's unfunny. It's actually pretty offensive. And I can see if those scenes with the humans really turned people off from the movie because they were really bad. But fortunately for me, that's really only about 30% of the movie, and the rest is all Chucky and his bride and his child, and just the hilarious antics that they're up to. Overall, I'd say this is a vastly underrated Chucky movie by butthurt fanboys that only want Chucky to be a series of slasher movies. I'll say it again, I think his transition into comedy felt completely natural and warranted. I watch these movies for Chucky. I do not care about them being scary. I want to see him say funny shit and do crazy things. And these movies, that's where the focus is. He's just saying funny shit and doing crazy things. That's what these movies are. And so, of course, I would really like these movies because it's giving me exactly what I want from the franchise. I don't care about these movies being scary. I do not find Chucky to be scary at all. So because of those reasons, these are my favorite Chucky movies in the franchise. And more specifically, I would say Seed of Chucky is my absolute favorite of all of them. And I know, that's a contrary opinion, completely opposite of what most people say, but I don't care, you can fight me. Until I'm given a reason not to believe that these are good comedy movies, I will continue to say that they are. Because again, most of the complaints I've seen with these movies is that, oh, they're not slasher movies, I want Chucky to be a slasher. Oh, they're doing Scream-type meta-humor, and I don't really like that. I want Chucky to be a slasher. I haven't really seen any other complaints, that go very deep beyond that. And until I see someone give an adequate reason as to why these movies just completely suck ass, I will continue to say that they're worth checking out. And finally, we get to the last Chucky movie that I watched, and the most recent one before the remake, Cult of Chucky. This one was also a straight-to-video movie. I felt it was a significant improvement over Curse of Chucky. It looked better from a cinematography standpoint. There was a lot of really great-looking shots in this movie. I really loved the setting of the movie. But again, like Curse of Chucky, I think Cult of Chucky is really held back by the constraints of its budget. There's some bad special effects in it. There's parts where they look out a window and it's clearly green screen. The acting in it fluctuates frequently from, being passably okay to being bad. And the writing was kind of the same. It was mostly impressive, of impressive quality for a movie of this budget, but some of the dialogue exchanges weren't very good at all, and some of the plot elements just didn't make any sense. However, I am going to give this movie more leeway for its flaws because I'm sure they were a lot more limited with time and money than in, the previous theatrical Chucky movies that they made. And another reason I'm going to give it leeway for these flaws is because of the scope of what they set out to do with this movie. Again, they had a very small, limited budget to make this straight-to-video movie, and their goals for this movie were very ambitious. I think they did a great job giving the constraints they were placed under, because this movie is pretty wild from start to finish. The narrative is smoothly paced and it rarely ever drags. The story was actually written well enough where I actually cared for the human drama in the movie for the first time since the first Child's Play. So I was really invested and engaged in pretty much everything that was happening in the movie. The way the film ends, it leaves you on a pretty exciting note that promises even further ambitious ideas to expand the universe of Chucky. Thankfully, the remake is not going to hinder Massini from making more of his Chucky movies. Apparently he has more Chucky movies planned, as well as a sci-fi TV show in the works. And if all of what he has planned is up to par and as good as Cult of Chucky, then I'm definitely looking forward to all of it. It's sad that the money that went towards something like the Child's Play remake couldn't be put towards a movie like this that actually has the potential to be really great. But hey, at least the remake doesn't mean that Massini is going to stop doing what he's doing, because he's really killing it, and so far, past 30 years, made a really solid franchise. But at the very least, I guess I do have to thank the Child's Play remake, because if it wasn't for how shitty it was, I would have never had the motivation to watch all of the original Chucky movies and discover what is probably my favorite slasher franchise now. It used to be Friday the 13th, but the Chucky movies, I enjoy them significantly more. And in case you're wondering, this is how I ranked all of the Chucky movies on Letterboxd. That's right, Seed is still my favorite. Fuck you, I don't care. This is also a good time to mention, if you want to, I highly recommend you follow me on Letterboxd if you're interested in hearing my thoughts on every movie I watch, because I do log every movie I watch into Letterboxd, and most of the time I do leave a brief little review giving my thoughts. And so if you want to hear my thoughts on movies before I talk about them on this channel, or you want to hear my thoughts on movies that I probably will never talk about on this channel, then definitely give me a follow on there. So the TLDR of this video is that I'm a Chucky fanboy now. I love the franchise, I love the characters, and it's all thanks to the shittiness of the Child's Play reboot, because I hated that movie so fucking much it made me binge watch all of the originals. The originals, written by Don Mancini and starring Brad Dourif, are great, and the remake sucks balls. I'm Randall, and thank you for listening to me.